everyone. Thank you for joining VALOORES Business Academy webinars. And during this COVID time, hope you are all safe with your family. Today, we will discuss during 40 minutes cyber-covered financial crimes and cybersecurity in line with international regulators. This webinar will be recorded and posted on VALOORES websites for our valued guests who would want to revisit it going forward. I'm sure a lot of you have questions, so you can submit them during the talk by clicking on the QA button below, and I will relay them as much as we can to our panelists at the end of the webinar. I'm Joelle Sikkar. I bring around 20 years of professional experience in banking, mostly in compliance and business intelligence. I'll be moderating and balancing the message across our speakers, Ziad, Firaz, and George Rahme. George Rahme is a cybersecurity expert. He is experienced in combating the finance of terrorism, cybersecurity, and resilience. Ziad Firaz is the VALOORES Group International Business Development Director, experienced in compliance and digital transformation. So back to our subject. A third of the world's population is in coronavirus lockdown. An estimated of 300 million office workers globally are working from home, including up to 90% of banking and insurance workers. Most of these staff log into their firm sites remotely, attending meetings using teleworking arrangements and accessing non-public data online, sometimes via home computers and private devices. So since the customers of most financial institutions are also staying at home, doing financial transactions online has become not just a convenience, but a necessity. So Ziad, a quick word from your angle.
Hello, everyone. To your point, Joelle, today's webinar outlines official responses to the increasing levels of financial crime during the global lockdown. It highlights financial crime and risk management seen so far during the current crisis. We'll summarize official approaches to strengthening financial institutions' cyber resilience, and we'll discuss the main AML measures taken by selected authorities worldwide. George, I'm sure you have a say on this one.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Zia. Thank you, Joelle. Well, we have to consider that, on the other hand, COVID-19 is reshaping the cybercrime economy. We will discuss how cybercriminal merchants are going all in and seeking more exposure. We will see how the demand for ransomware is on the rise. We will touch upon new and emerging risk issues for financial crime linked to the COVID-19 pandemic, and we will address the issues and recommendations for collective action in combating illicit financial flows during the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. To you, Joelle.
Thank you, Ziad. Thank you, George. So before going through our agenda topics with you, a quick introduction on VALOORES 30 years in 30 seconds. VALOORES was founded in Lille, northern France, and now operating all around the globe. We deliver to multiple lines of business, to name a few: banking, insurance, digital government, multimedia, communication, healthcare, and the list is long. So when it comes to cyber crimes and fraud, VALOORES offers CyberX platform, analytics and AI, advanced certified anti-hacking, and state security cloud model. So now in response to the issues faced and the questions being asked by organizations, regulators in the United States, United Kingdom, and the European Union, such as FATF, Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, IMF, etc., have issued guidance on the privacy and data security implications of COVID-19 and how organizations respond. So while some regulators seem to be taking a very rigid approach to the laws that they are enforcing, a number of regulators seem to recognize the gravity and pressures of the situations and have issued guidance reflecting the importance of balancing sometimes competing interests. So as you can see, our agenda for today is quite exhaustive. We will discuss with Ziad and George what COVID-19 changed in the financial industry, financial authorities raising cybercrime awareness, COVID-19 impact on IFRS 9, as well as on AML regimes, authorities' guidance, and finally, how cyber criminals are taking advantage of the COVID-19. So Ziad, as you are the expert in financial crime, risk management, and regulatory compliance, there are no new issues when examining the effectiveness of financial crime risk management on a global basis. How are the legal and regulatory frameworks enhanced to enable stakeholders achieve improved outcomes? To you, Ziad.
That was an expected question, Joel. On the collective international response, the FATF has already begun coordination across the FATF members, the UN, the IMF, the World Bank, the Egmont Group, etc. On clear communication and priorities, clear regulatory guidance in line with the risk-based approach takes into account a necessary flexibility, and that's a key word here, which is emanating from changes to the system-wide pandemic environment. The IIF believes that national adherence to the FATF recommendations and implementation of findings from FATF mutual evaluation reports are of a critical importance. Now, on cross-border and domestic information sharing, a key component of the collective response to COVID-19 related financial crime issues is effective sharing of critical financial crime data across borders and domestically in all directions. On public and private sector cooperation, it's important for the private sector to have closer collaboration with the law enforcement authorities and regulators in preventing COVID-19 related crimes. And by the way, VALOORES is equipping national and regional authorities with mechanisms to share feedback from the public sector to the private. On the use of technological innovation, as previously outlined by the IIF, the financial crime risk management can benefit from advancement in financial technology solutions. VALOORES, though, is a pioneer in catering such solutions like machine learning, data analytics, tiered KYC, and digital identity. The FATF recently stated that they support the use of technology, including fintech, regtech, and supervisory technology to the fullest extent possible in this area. International standard-setting bodies are examining how new methods of tech innovation could support due diligence measures, customer onboarding, and even customer maintenance. VALOORES Digital ID, which is one of our previous webinars, is a pertinent example of identifying people remotely for both onboarding and conducting transactions while mitigating money laundering and terrorist financing risks. KYC practices during the pandemic are impacted too. The ID is no longer presented physically, hence the need for remote customer due diligence measures. That's a wrap for me, Joel.
Thank you. So we can see that the use of technological innovation is crucial here, and obviously VALOORES can play a fundamental role in all this. George, since you are a cybersecurity expert, national agencies responsible for cybersecurity have given guidance and advice, then published measures to strengthen the cybersecurity posture of organizations and their staff while teleworking. So would you please elaborate more on that?
Yes, Joel, for sure. Yes, thank you. Several authorities, like for example, Bank of Italy, have issued public statements to remain vigilant to the increasing risks connected with money laundering and to remind employees to be alert for such criminal activity. In response to current and emerging cyber threats, Interpol has released international guidelines. The UK and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agent in the US released the practical indicator on systems that have been compromised and pushes individuals and organizations to review their guidance on. First, home working. Second, mitigating malware and ransomware attacks. Third, VPN security and risk management. Same in Singapore, the Singapore Computer Emergency Response Team recently published measures to strengthen the cybersecurity postures of organizations and their staff while teleworking. Ensuring that remote access systems are updated with the latest patches, performing regular audit of privileged domains, providing regular reminder to employees about cyber threats and preventative tips, putting in place cyber incident response and recovery plans that can be effectively implemented. Some authorities have provided guidance on the heightened risk to IT networks and non-public information. For instance, the New York State Department of Financial Services highlighted the importance of relying on a secure VPN connection, using multi-factor authentication protocols, robust security protocols, configuring corporate video and audio conferencing facilities, address third-party risks, and coordinating with the vendors. Several authorities, like the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, are emphasizing staff training and awareness at financial institutions, and VALOORES Business Academy is providing cybersecurity courses in multiple languages around the globe. Several organizations organize webinars on attack techniques and possible countermeasures and facilitate training on the correct use of company devices and the strengthening of controls connected to remote work. To you, George.
Thank you, George. So, Ziad, despite government guarantees for corporate borrowing and more direct help in covering staff costs, many businesses will fail as a result of the COVID crisis. And many that survive will be financially damaged, unfortunately. The banks that lend to them are sure to suffer, not only credit losses, but foregone revenues from the collapse in business activity. Can you, Ziad, elaborate more on this?
That's well received, Joel. That's quite an interesting question. Central banks' actions and prior supervisory requirements have supported bank liquidity and liquidity management capabilities. Fiscal responses are around broad tax relief, targeted tax relief, government grants, and government credit provision. Monetary responses are around changes in targeted interest rates, purchases of government debt and securities, revival of several financial crisis era programs, and direct provision of credit. Now, regulatory and supervisory responses were around reductions in effective capital requirements, encouragement of use of capital and liquidity buffers, encouragement of forbearance on troubled loans, and encouragement of new lending. That makes adjusting risk assessment as a no-brainer. You know, that's based off impact by sector. So some industries like airlines, oil and gas, leisure, and banking are suffering from extreme increases of default premiums. Other industries, though, like information technology or pharmaceuticals, are less affected by the crisis. The scenario analysis is critical in this uncertain environment. So COVID-19 scenarios account for pandemic scenarios, public policy response like confinement of fiscal, monetary, or regulatory actions, macroeconomic and market scenarios. Loss forecasting models need reviews on models for IFRS 9 or CECL stress testing. We may also need overlays if scenarios are extrapolating, which is extrapolating far outside of historical range of macroeconomic variables. Top-down adjustments are needed too, through industry level adjustments, given specific scenario impacts like sector risk analysis and geographical adjustments. And finally, client level adjustment is a must too. And that's based on market information, cash flow information, and client specific risk assessment, like impact on customer base, supply chain, and so on. And that should account for restructuring and modification actions where appropriate. I hope I've answered your question, Joel.
Yeah, sure. So Ziad, once again, VALOORES does provide the right tools and frameworks for liquidity management in line with the increase of IFRS 9 CECL reserves and the negative impact on capital ratios. So back to you, George. As the COVID-19 pandemic pushes the above ground economy to a major recession, the cybercrime economy appears to still be a hard charging ahead. So the virus has rapidly reshaped the way business is being done on the dark web, as buyers and sellers jump on the opportunity to capitalize on global fears, as well as dramatic shifts in supply and demand. Even some dark web actors traditionally known for taking a steady approach have seemingly changed their behavior to seize this once-in-a-lifetime chance. With that in mind, George, how is COVID-19 uprooting the cybercrime status quo? To you, George.
Yes, and the subject, Joel will address 5 ways COVID-19 is reshaping the cybercrime economy. 1, laying low a no-go as merchants seek more exposure. We have seen actors selling to a larger addressable market by advertising their fraud schemes and phishing kits on a larger underground marketplaces. Previously, actors have stayed and offered their services only on Red or Exploit, some of the top tier lockdowns forums where they have to earn trust and vie for credibility and peer ratings. That can be risky for them, as the more places actors copy paste, the more their audience could consider them as potential spammers. But it seems actors are willing to take a reputational risk in order to reach a wider audience over multiple platforms. Meanwhile, actors are even looking at non-traditional mediums to sell their wares, offering up contact information on apps such as Telegram and even leveraging gaming platforms like Steam and Discord, for example. 2, a demand for ransomware is up. But the question is, can victims even pay? The number of dark web marketplaces references to ransomware in March, the month COVID-19 forced mass lockdowns, increased 50% compared to the average number of ransomware mentions compiled over the previous 3 months. Ransomware as a service has been in high demand. There is an increase in ransomware leveraging false COVID-19 sites infecting devices, both mobile and desktop. Even successful ransomware infections during this time may not be worth it because the victims cannot pay. That economic reality is likely that companies are now less able to pay than they were prior due to COVID-19 outbreak. 3, credentials market. Stolen usernames and passwords have long been a popular commodity sold on the dark web. But with large population stuck inside their homes, maintaining social distance, experts say interest has grown for credentials for video conferencing apps, media streaming services, and VPN. From February to March, references to video conferencing application jumped by 63%, because the massive rise in popularity of video conferencing apps, which include users not as familiar with the nuances of the technology, has created an opening for hackers and internet trolls alike. Credential for streaming services doubling their subscriber bases amid the COVID-19 crisis. VPN technologies are targeted as well. So why is that malicious cyber actors know that with increased work from home practices during COVID-19, most companies and corporations use VPN technology as an extra step of production before their internal network can be accessed, and that VPNs are literally the gateway to important sensitive information. 4, feeding uncontrolled behavior for phish and fraud kits. We have seen an increase in fraud and phishing kits where threat actors compile and sell the necessary tools to carry out a fraud campaign related to COVID-19, or similar, like taking advantage of the volume of loan application related to stimulus. 5, crypto gains credence as cash is trashed. Cryptocurrency, often untraceable, has long been a popular method of conducting transactions on the dark web. But the spread of COVID-19 might have lent further credence to the concept of digital coins. A big theory on the underground is that COVID-19 is going to be the death of cash, as cash could potentially spread the virus. As this anti-cash sentiment spreads, malicious actors are expanding their offering beyond ransomware and other malware programs to include various crypto tools and services. To you, Joel.
Thank you, George. Very interesting. So Ziad, in line with all this, how will our near future look like? And what are the measures taken under FATF and other authorities' guidance? To you, Ziad.
So that is the question, Joel, how our near future will look like. Well, the FATF has issued a statement encouraging the official sector, and we've detailed that in our previous webinar. And that's for financial institutions and other businesses to remain vigilant to current money laundering and terrorist financing risks. And that is while using the flexibility built into the FATF's risk-based approach, implementing responsible digital customer onboarding in the light of the lockdown and social distancing measures, working closely together by sharing relevant information, and offering effective mechanisms to report COVID-19 related financial crimes to authorities. All central banks and banking supervisory agencies, like the Hong Kong Monetary Authority and others, have referred to the FATF statement and drawn the regulated institutions' attention and expectations around emerging money laundering and terrorist financing risks. Some financial authorities like FinCEN and the OCC have provided certain regulatory relief even under the RBA to the AML CFT requirements, and other authorities have emphasized that financial institutions seek to mitigate money laundering risks by using tools like VALOORES machine learning, to which financial institutions have recently turned for improving money laundering detection. Now, other authorities like the Luxembourg CCCF have been echoing FATF's call to use financial technology to manage some of the customer due diligence issues presented by COVID-19. And that is by using systems like VALOORES Digital ID, which, with processes, governance, and other safeguards that assure an appropriate level of trustworthiness. Other authorities, like the Swiss Financial Market Supervisory Authority, the FINMA, have adopted to allow simplified due diligence approaches. And they've decided to grant a facilitation in the application of due diligence requirements for new business relationships entered into before July 1st, 2020. And that is manageable with technology like the VALOORES tiered KYC. Last but not least, supervisors, FIUs, and law enforcement agencies like the HKMA and the FinCEN are using existing channels like the VALOORES Government Information Exchange platforms to support public-private partnership and share money laundering and terrorist financing risks linked to COVID-19 with financial institutions and other private sector entities. That's a big topic, Joel. I hope I have.
Always a pleasure hearing you. So, George, back to you. Cyber criminals are serial entrepreneurs who rely on lapses in human judgment The weaker their target security awareness, the easier it is to deceive them. So as the virus spread, so did the scale of cybercrime, exploiting it. The sophistication of internet-enabled scams directed at non-government entities, such as private companies and individuals, varied considerably. So how are cybercriminals taking advantage of the COVID-19 pandemic? To you, George.
Yes, thank you. Well, taking advantage first from profiting from a global crisis. I mean, exploiting uncertainty. COVID-19 era attacks are the latest and established trend. Cyber criminals take advantage of newsworthy events to spam potential victims with phishing emails. Phishing emails can easily be customized to fit local contexts. Countries from Canada to Switzerland have detected malware distributed through official-looking websites that claim to offer advice on avoiding or treating COVID-19. Second, exploiting fear. Wherever there is an outbreak or disease, cyber criminals play on fear. Because COVID-19 outbreaks of SARS, Ebola has provided psychological cover for online spams. Well, as a matter of fact, we need to consider also that new internet domains for COVID-19 specific cybercrime, and that many cyber criminals have opened special domains. One study found that out of 4K internet domains registered since January with the terms coronavirus or COVID-19, 3% are assessed as malicious and another 5% as suspect. Okay, another point, espionage. State-sponsored cybercrime groups are taking advantage of COVID-19 to break into government and corporate IT systems on espionage missions. Another point, synchronized attacks via phishing emails and social media. The Hades group has targeted both public sector entities and individuals in Ukraine using COVID-19 news as a decoy. The group is thought that have ties with APT28, which gained attention after US commentators accused it of hacking into the email account of 400 American political figures during 2015 and 2016. Another point, crime for profit. On crime for profit, cybercrime operations consist of spam emails that contains a link to a map of COVID-19 global spread. Clicking on this link activity malware. On increasing use of home offices, there has been speculation that with the massive shift to home offices, a tsunami of cybercrime targeted of unsecure personal Wi-Fi network and non-sanitized computers could lead to severe data breaches or losses. The remote conferencing technology proved vulnerable to video hijacking. Hackers were able to gain access to webcams and microphones on individual computers and interrupt webinars. The lockdowns that have been imposed in some countries have forced many households to rely more on remote banking and payment. While lockdowns are still in effect, the increase in remote transaction could put bank IT system under strain. The fact that many bank staff are also working from home leaves them susceptible to being distracted, which would reduce their capacity to swiftly identify cyber risk. Thank you. To you, Joanne.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Ziad. It was really insightful with all the subjects you've addressed. Hope our guests benefited from all this information. So, to wrap up, the COVID-19 crisis provides a favorable environment for financial crime. Authorities worldwide have responded with statements and by providing guidance to financial institutions, particularly on mitigating cyber attacks and money laundering risks. In both areas, authorities have highlighted the need for, one, drawing attention to these crimes so that financial institutions and the general public are better informed, and active sharing of information between the public and the private sectors, and within and between jurisdictions. To you, Ziad, to conclude.
Well, thank you, Joel. So some of our conversation highlights today span the criminals that are exploiting vulnerabilities opened up by COVID-19 lockdown, as previously mentioned by George. And that's increasing the risk of cyber attacks and money laundering and terrorist financing. Another item we've addressed is authorities worldwide that have responded by drawing financial institutions' attention to these threats and the provided guidance on ways to improve cybersecurity and mitigate money laundering and terrorist financing risks. Financial authorities are warning financial institutions to be particularly watchful in relation to their IT networks and non-public data. And financial authorities also emphasize the need for financial institutions to be vigilant of new money laundering and terrorist financing risks, and to continue meeting the AML CFT requirements while using the flexibility built into the AML CFT risk-based approach and the framework around it, alongside the digital customer onboarding and simplified due diligence processes and so on. In all areas, the official guidance underscores the trade-off between expecting financial institutions to enhance or adjust their cyber resilience and AML frameworks, and on the other hand, avoiding imposing an excessive burden that could hinder financial institutions in delivering key financial services. I'm pretty sure, George, you have a say on the cyber resilience flavor of it.
Yes, yeah, because protecting both businesses and individuals against cybercrime in the post-COVID economy will be a top-down process in which government must take the lead. For too long, we have viewed cybercrime as a threat only if it engages in espionage. The rise of ransomware, together with the willingness of cybercriminals to attack healthcare systems at a critical moment, has meant this indifference is no longer conscionable. Since investigation and the cross-jurisdictional pursuit of cybercriminals is unlikely to become easier with time, especially due to increasing geopolitical tensions, urgent measures and important measures to be implemented after the immediate crisis passes off. As an urgent measures, we need to take two main points. Streamline public communication by government agencies. Second, promote threat-related information sharing across and between governments. As an important measures, introduce cybersecurity sensitization programs in school and workplaces. Increase investment in cybersecurity for public systems not linked to defense or intelligence, including healthcare systems. This should be a post-COVID priority. Thank you.
Thank you, George. So in line with authority standards, and when it comes to financial services, VALOORES is a pioneer in master data governance and KYC, GRC, regulatory compliance, financial crime, AML, transaction monitoring, enterprise risk management. All that is carefully designed around improving operations, execution, and decision making. So when it comes to implementation, VALOORES has aligned its solutions with regulators to provide significant fintech, regtech, and supervisory tech opportunities to manage issues presented by COVID-19. A quick intro on VALOORES Business Academy. It accelerates transformation by unlocking the potential of people. We have more than a decade of experience in designing and deploying learning programs catered by a network of consultants and capability centers around the globe, with webinars like today's and courses carefully designed by subject matter experts. VALOORES comes today to highlight the authorities' guidance to financial institutions and other businesses through the emergent cyber crimes risk to mitigate risk, detect, and report cyber attacks. So you have the values, we bring you the added values. Let's switch to the questions. Time check, I think we select a few for now. I can see questions about cyber threats, digital ID, malicious cyber actors. Okay, so let's start with the first question. I think that falls under your wings, Ziad. Despite government guarantees for corporate borrowing and more direct help in covering staff costs, many businesses will fail as a result of the COVID crisis, and many that survive will be financially damaged. What should banks do? To you, Ziad.
So just to make sure I got the question right. So the question, Joel, is, and what should banks do as many businesses will fail as a result of the COVID crisis, and many that survive will be financially damaged. Am I right?
Exactly, yes. This is the question, Ziad.
Banks should immediately assess the impact of various economic scenarios by using their own models and by applying their own IFRS 9 or CECL accounting frameworks to update forecasts. In addition to the macroeconomic scenarios, these scenarios should also consider pandemic-specific considerations, which capture microeconomic impacts on borrowers, either at the industry or geography level. So banks should also carefully communicate and comment on their disclosure of IFRS 9 CECL allowances to their investors once results are released. And most importantly, banks should monitor credit exposures in the worst affected industries and geographies, proactively working with clients to reduce their risk and manage through the situation. Hope I've addressed the question, Joel.
Hope so, Ziad, hope so. So thank you. Another question to George, since it tackled the cyber attacks and cyber threats. Criminals are taking advantage of the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic to launch a variety of cyber attacks. How are cyber threats evolving, and what are the latest ones identified? To you, George.
Well, well, it's a great question, by the way. How the latest cyber threats evolving? The latest cyber threats evolving are first malicious domain. As I stated previously, Joel, there has been an increase of domains registered with the keyword COVID, COVID-19, Corona, to take advantage of the growing number of people searching for information about COVID-19. And many of these are considered to be developed with malicious intent. Second, online scams and phishing. Cyber criminals are creating fake websites related to COVID-19 to entice victims into opening malicious attachment or clicking phishing links resulting on identity impersonation or illegal access to personal accounts. Third, data harvesting malware. Data harvesting malware such as remote access Trojan, info stealers using COVID-19 related information as a lure to compromise networks, steal data, divert money, and build botnets. Four, disruptive malware. Cyber criminals are deploying disruptive malware like ransomware against critical infrastructure and response institutions such as hospital and medical centers, which are overwhelmed with the health crisis. Finally, vulnerabilities of working from home. Threat actors are exploiting vulnerabilities of systems, network, and applications used by businesses, governments, and the school to support staff who are now working remotely. As a growing number of people relying on online tools overburden the security measures put in place, offenders search for more chances of exposure to steal data, make a profit, or cause disruption. Hope it's clear.
We hope so. Thank you, George. So another question to Ziad. what are the European calls for safeguards to prevent looting of relief funds, AML aftershocks, and exploitation fears? Thank you for this question.
Yeah, well, I was expecting that. So the question is around the European safeguards, correct?
Yeah,
Joel?
yeah, this time European, yes.
Well, the European Banking Authority is supporting banks' focus on core operations. So the EBA has decided to postpone the EU-wide stress test exercise to 2021. And this will allow banks to focus and ensure continuity on their core operations, including support of their day-to-day customers. So for 2020, the EBA will carry out an additional EU-wide transparency exercise to provide updated information on banks' exposure and asset quality to market participants. Now, the EU Commission is at the heart of this initiatives with nearly $1 trillion in pandemic emergency purchase program. The UK Financial Conduct Authority has published how the pandemic could be affecting financial institutions and consumers, and lays out steps the regulator is taking to ease the pressure on banks, like support for mortgage customers. I hope that gives an idea, Joanne.
Thank you, Ziad. Thank you. George, be ready. This is a long question. The cyber threats facing individuals, businesses, and critical infrastructure will continue to evolve, causing harm globally. Following the rapidly changing social and economic circumstances, further increases in cybercrime will occur as criminals look for other revenue streams by leveraging the cyber elements of other types of crime. Can you discuss this or elaborate? Thank you again for this question.
Yes, thank you. Well, to be clear in this particular subject, Joel, as per the Interpol, the future development expected to see are first, online scams, because phishing will surge due to the economic downturn and shift in business landscape, generating new criminal activity. Criminals will take advantage of the underground market to look for cybercrime as a service, given the ease of access, low cost, and potential high returns that such platforms can offer. Threat actors will target individuals' personal information through the spoofing and exploitation of digital content providers. Government, businesses, and the schools will come to rely on online connectivity and virtual communication tools as employees continue to work from home, increasing their vulnerabilities and presenting more opportunity for cyber criminals to exploit. Well, that's it.
Thank you, George. So, dear guests, I will take two more questions. Ziad, since you are expert in digital transformation and digital ID, this question goes to you. You've mentioned the use of technology on the digital ID spectrum. How about the jurisdictions where digital ID is not allowed or available?
That's a catch-22. So the question is around jurisdictions where digital ID is not allowed, correct?
Correct.
So my call out would be in jurisdictions where digital ID is not allowed or even not available, other options for customer due diligence should be leveraged in a way to, that ensures at least the current crisis and doesn't exclude the vulnerable in society, from access to the financial system due to social distancing rules. And why this is important? Well, that's because where we have new aid or loan programs developed in response to the current crisis that may not be accessible due to established customer due diligence requirements, which slows down and prevents access to legitimate relief funds. And here it's worth noting that digital measures have been considered for both, first and second lines of defense, and in maintaining an effective financial crime compliance and risk management life cycle during the COVID-19 response. Hope I've addressed the question.
Thank you, Ziad. We hope so. So the final question goes to you, George. Well, this time a straightforward question. How could COVID-19 or how COVID-19 is exploited by malicious cyber actors?
Well, this is a joint alert from the United States Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and the United Kingdom National Cybersecurity Center. All are seeing a growing use of COVID-19 related themes by malicious cyber actors. At the same time, the surge in teleworking has increased the use of potentially vulnerable services, such as VPN, amplifying the threat to individuals and organizations. APT groups and cyber criminals are targeting individuals, small and medium enterprises, and large organizations with COVID-19 related scams and phishing emails. This alert provides an overview of COVID-19 related malicious cyber activity and offers practical advice that individuals and organizations can follow to reduce the risk of being impacted. By the way, please note that this is a fast-moving situation, and this alert does not seek to catalog all COVID-19 related malicious cyber activities. Individuals and organizations should remain alert to increased activity relating to COVID-19 and to take proactive steps to protect themselves. Hope I did address this question.
Thank you, George. Thank you, George and Ziad. Thank you again for joining us today. And thank you, our dear panelists. Stay tuned for upcoming VALOORES webinars with VALOORES Business Academy, and stay safe.